A special call council meeting for the city of Lake City to order for December the 28th of 2022. If everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to meet this evening to carry on the business of our community. We ask for your guidance tonight. We ask that what we do is pleasing in your eyes and for the betterment of our community. We ask you to look after our citizens, our troops, and our first responders. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Ms. Sykes, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Jernigan?
Here.
Mr. Hill?
Here.
Ms. Young? Here. Mr. Sampson?
Here.
Mayor Witt?
Here.
Mr. Dial?
Here.
Mr. Kennon?
Here.
Chief Miles?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the Lake City Council has opened its public meeting. Since 1968, the city code has prohibited any person from making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks or becoming boisterous while addressing the city council. Yelling or making audible comments from the audience constitutes boisterous conduct. Such conduct will not be tolerated. There's only one approved manner of addressing the city council, that is to be recognized and speak from the podium. As a reminder, persons are not to openly carry a handgun or carry a concealed weapon or firearm while the governing body is meeting. First item is approval of the agenda. I have no changes.
So move, Mayor.
Second.
Motion second to approve the agenda is published. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is public comments. If everybody would try to keep it to the 3 minutes that we're allowed. First one would be Mr. Roland Luster.
Good evening, Mayor. My name is Roland Luster. I live at 342 Southwest Ridge Street, Lake City, Florida. And before I really start, I'd like permission, Mayor, if I could ask your city manager and your attorney if they have read the 1947 land grant deed between the U.S. government and Lake City.
They want to add, that's up to them.
I have not. Have not.
Okay, that's very important, and why I say this, first let me say that Lake City Gateway Airport is what is known as an enterprise fund. Basically, what that means for those in the audience who may not be aware of it, means they have to generate their own funds. All the revenue that they spend comes from the airport. They get no taxpayer funds at all. Second point, Lake City Airport is what is known as a land grant airport. Basically what happened in 1942, the federal government took the airport to become a training base for the Navy. It became Lake City Gateway Naval Air Station, and it trained the P-1s and P-2 pilots for the Navy and the Marines. Then after the war in 1947, they deeded it back to the city, and it was deeded back under this 1947 land grant deed. This is very important because in this deed, it has a lot of assurances that the city has agreed to adhere to. And as Mr. Hill has pointed out, one of the assurances, they will get fair market value for all the leases that they have. Another important part of that is that each lease must be sent to the FAA for review, comments, and approval. And if failure to do so will find the city in non-compliance. And Mayor, you can attest that in 1980, the city sold 10 acres to Homes of Merit for $10, and as a result of that, the FAA put them in non-compliance. What that meant was, for probably 5 years or so, the city got no funds from the FAA, and it really set the airport back as a result of that. So that's why it's so important that we get fair market value. The other thing is, to give you an example, while I was out at the airport as the airport manager, we received about $24.5 million in a way of grants from the city for the city airport. those grants had a match of about $1.4 million, or actually about 1.5. If you look at the amount of that the HAECO had paid during that same time period, they paid in just over $400,000. So that meant that the airport had to come up with $1 million to be able to receive these grants. As a result, it really set the airport back for future development because all the funds were going towards paying for the projects that were being done. Another example, the FAA has 3 types of airports, 3 categories of airports. The first one is commercial service airports. Those are the ones that have regular scheduled airlines. Another one is the general aviation airport, who has no scheduled airlines. That's what Lake City is. And then the third one is a designated airport as a reliever. The thing that's so important, because Lake City is a GA airport, the design criteria that is used is completely different from that of a commercial service. Even though even though Lake City has commercial jets coming in for services, they do not meet the required design criteria for the FAA. And what that means is when you start doing a project, a lot of items are not eligible for refunds being funded by the FAA.
Y'all pretty much passed the 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
But could I say one last thing?
Yes.
The big comment has been how to come up with a fair market value. I say what the city should look at doing is using what HAECO used. Well, the last couple of years I was here, they subleased one of their hangars for I think it was, I was told $16,500. And if you multiply that times 12, that's $198,000 a year. And if you multiply that times 8 hangars, that's $1,584,000. And so,
Thank you.
yep.
Thank you, Ms. Ruler.
Next is Mr. Jeff Hendry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not here to debate fair market value leases. I'm here to really represent the North Florida Economic Development Partnership and kind of share with you all what we do and really talk about this project specifically. What we do essentially for 14 rural counties, Columbia County would be in one of those, is recruit, retain, and expand businesses for this region. And I thought when I came here, I'd be talking about expansion, but it seems like this has kind of turned in more of a retention talk. And so I will tell you, in the 14 years I've worked with the NFEDP, I've never been at a city council meeting or a county commission meeting with this much at stake. So I just want to go on record and say that. I just want to share a couple of facts with you about the community impact of HAECO. And you may or may not have heard these numbers, but I think they're worth mentioning, and what their projections are. And, for right now, you're looking at roughly 650 jobs. Sometimes those things get looked at as numbers, but they generate wealth for this community and they impact every single industry, every single business owner, every single family. The average wage out at that MRO is over $53,000. The average private sector job in Columbia County right now is a little over $41,000. So that business out there is paying well over the median average. The other thing I would ask you to look at is over the next 5 years, they're projecting spending and investing over $200 million. Not just, and 85% of that investment is in the jobs. And those jobs lead to family sustainability. They look at reinvestment in all sectors in this community. Oh, that works out, by the way, to over $40 million investment in Columbia County City and the city of Lake City over the course of the next 5 years. Over $40 million. So when we start looking at fair market value, I would just encourage us to sit down, work those details out. Let's do it fairly. Let's get this job done, because at the end of the day, You have tremendous amount. You will not make a bigger decision sitting at this council meeting than you will on this particular job. If this company were to leave, just saying what if, look at the impact, not just at the airport, not just at the existing families that are deriving their livelihood from that. When skilled labor loses their job or their job is moved, they relocate. And when they relocate, it's not just that individual, it's that family. And when they relocate away from a home that pays property taxes and ad valorem taxes. The spread of that wealth throughout this community can't be overstated. The last thing I want to say, since we have 3 minutes, can I just close with this? They've been a tremendous corporate community partner in this community. During the pandemic, I'm sure many of you know that their employees, they weren't working, but HAECO put them to work in your city. Over 13,000 hours of community service was done here, doing everything from picking up trash to cleaning common, to painting, to all these different things. I want you to really know that you've got a strong community partner. By the way, they have a history of almost 60 years between Aero, Timco, and HAECO. There's not a longer standing business in our entire region for 14 rural counties that produce 650 jobs in this entire region than that company. I'll close with this. Again, I'll just say, it's not just the direct jobs, it's the indirect jobs that you will see and the businesses down in this downtown area will see between the restaurants, the retail, the gas, all that money gets circulated in your economy. And this from these men and women that work out there, that live here, that do everything else in this community with you. So I just hope you can't look at them as numbers of jobs, estimates on fair market value. I hope you look at them as family and people that participate in this community and that pay more than their fair share than what they do in the city of Lake City.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Jerry Parrish.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and commission members. I'm Jerry Parrish. I'm the Chief Economist and Director of State and Local Policy Analysis at the Institute of Government at Florida State University. And my job kind of is to help business people understand, state and local government, and to help state and local government understand business and their impacts. I also teach. I teach in the Masters in Applied Economics program at Florida State University, and I've been doing that for about 10 years. And the report that you see that I saw that they left out here was one that I wrote myself. And I want to be real clear, nobody paid me to write it. I thought it was an interesting project to take a look at. So I wanted to see and just calculate the impact using normal economic models that we use all the time. And I teach these models to my grad students, so I'm here to answer questions about them if anybody has. But I took a look at this, and quite honestly, when I work in rural counties like Columbia County, this is a huge number of jobs. We never see anything, this big that starts over 600 jobs. But when we analyze the indirect and induced impacts, and think about the indirect impacts, that's basically the supply chain for this company, if you want to think about it loosely. The induced is all the salaries, what they buy. It's the jobs at the grocery stores and the gas stations and all that stuff. That's what these three different levels are. So when we take the direct impact of losing these jobs and throw in, it would have an impact of indirect jobs of 231. So you've got about 640, which is my original calculation, 231 indirect jobs, and 236 induced jobs would be lost in Columbia County. And that totals up to be 1,107 jobs. That's almost 6% of the entire working population of the county in Columbia County. Fiscal impacts are big as well. $1.56 million a year go to the sub-county districts. And what that is, it's city taxes, it's special district taxes, those kind of things. That's every single year. 2.22 million per year goes to the county as well. And I even calculated when I met with HAECO, I came over here and met with them one time and asked them what their expansion plans were. I calculated the impacts of the expansion plan. You'll see that in a report. That would be another 120 direct jobs, totaling 207 jobs total. So we're talking about 1,300 jobs here is what we're talking about, and about $1.86 million of sub-county taxes a year, about $2.64 million worth of county taxes a year is what we're talking about, the economic impact. And if you guys have any questions, like I said, I teach these models to grad students. I use them all the time. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Like I said, I have no agenda here. Nobody's paying me to be here. I just thought you guys should understand what the impacts are of what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Glenn L. Bowden.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I will not be redundant. I just want to associate myself with the remarks given by the last speaker and the speaker prior to him. I think that when you talk about the future of HAECO, you got to think about the organization chart for the city of Lake City. The organization chart is this. At the top of the chart are the people. So the decision that you make here tonight should be with the people in mind. You hear this term fair market value, and you be sure the city get the best deal they can get. But the best deal for the city is to be sure that the people are taken care of. I don't know anybody back here that work at HAECO, but I know this. I know I visit a certain convenience store down at the intersection of Bell and 100, and I see a whole lot of people in the morning coming in with HAECO shirts on, buying breakfast. I see them at noontime coming to get their lunch. So when you make your decision tonight, be sure you're doing something that's going to provide a job for the people who works there. We're not talking about abstract or animal. We're talking about a person with families. Some of these same people, they pay our gas bills for the city of Lake City. They pay your water bill. And just think, for them to even be at this position in employment where they got to be anxious and concerned about their employment, I personally think it's unfair to them. And I think we can point the fans, you know, when I was city councilman, we probably dropped the ball with an arrow then. Probably dropped the ball in the negotiation. But it's always need to be about what's in the best interest of the citizens. And the citizens are the people who work out there. They're the ones who got to worry about the gas bill coming up next month because of the coal this month. So I would urge you, as you move forward, to consider this as much as you consider the contract. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I have. So we'll go to item 1, discussion, possible action, HAECO lease. We have a speaker, Mr. Attorney Ed Booth.
Mayor Witt, members of the council, Mr. Cannon and Mr. Dial, it's a pleasure to be here today. I was retained in September of 2021 as an aviation attorney, as an aviation expert to assist Lake City in negotiating a fair and equitable contract with HAECO. We're coming up with a plan to utilize the extensive leasehold they now occupy, which encompasses 114 acres and 700,000 square feet of hangar space. I have been involved in aviation my entire life, all aspects. My relevant experience for this assignment was having served as a board member of the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, ultimately its secretary. We had responsibility for 4 airports, Jackson International, Craig, Furlong, and Cecil. In that capacity, I became familiar with what is charged in this area for aeronautical activities, what is fair market value. And I'm here tonight to talk about that. I grew up in this area, I know Lake City well. I would hope that HAECO would have the respect for Lake City to offer them fair market value, and at the same time, I would hope that the citizens of Lake City would have enough civic pride to insist on fair market value for what is an incredibly valuable asset. You were part of a world market. I have been around the world dealing with aviation matters. I've been to the big event, the Paris Air Show, the Farnborough Air Show. HAECO is there exhibiting their wares every other year. And you probably don't realize what a booming industry this is and what a major player HAECO is in this market. But you have an asset that most communities would only dream of, and that's an 8,000 by 150-foot runway capable of accommodating any airplane flying in the world today that can be brought here and worked on in the large complex that HAECO currently leases. And my only objective when I started this assignment was to see that fair market value was obtained for this community. The demand for global air travel is booming like it never has before. The manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus, cannot build the airplanes fast enough, and therefore airplanes that might have been retired in the past are brought to places like Lake City to be refurbished according to the manufacturer's specifications to fly another 20, 30, 40,000 years. So the future is bright. It's an extremely profitable market, and it only makes sense that Lake City receive fair market value. What has been proposed, 8 cents a square foot, does not come close to approaching that. There's some other considerations that I have briefed the city on and want to talk about tonight, and that is federal funding. Since 2014, the Lake City Airport has obtained over $25 million of federal grants that primarily benefit HAECO and their operations. But when you accept federal money, it comes with a catch, and that catch is called grant assurances. When they give you money, they expect you to behave in some cleverly and closely enumerated manners, and these are called grant assurances, and there are 2 or 3 of them that bear mentioning tonight. One is grant assurance number 22, which is titled Economic Non-Discrimination. What this means is that other players in the industry, were they to come to Lake City and ask to lease available land, they would be entitled to be charged a rate comparable to whatever you might offer HAECO with their lease renewal. For example, if you approve a lease at 8 cents a square foot, Boeing, whoever could come here tomorrow and demand the same accommodation, and that is something that bears mentioning. Grant assurance number 24, which is titled Fee and Rental Structure, requires Lake City to run the airport in a self-sustaining fashion. That presupposes collecting adequate rent from tenants consistent with fair market value so that the airport is self-sustaining. The penalty for failing to comply with these grant assurances would be, and this has already been alluded to by Roland Lester a few minutes ago, is denial of future grants, and in extreme cases requiring Lake City to repay grants that had previously been issued to them. I am not sure why, or at least I haven't received a reasonable explanation how 8 cents a square foot is reasonable or fair market value. The leasehold is 115 acres, 700,000 square feet of hangar space. Another consideration that needs to be discussed is HAECO, by their presence, blocks access to 137 acres of otherwise rentable, usable aviation property. There's absolutely no accommodation made to Lake City for that other than the need to mow the grass on that 137 acres, and we take care of that. The former airport manager, Florence Straw, and I worked together over the course of the year to come up with a fair and equitable lease. We tried to look at comparable values. Anyone who's purchased a home understands what a comparable value is. If your neighbor's house sells for $100,000, you don't sell yours for $5,000. There's a certain level set by comparable sales. I can tell you that 43 miles down the road at Cecil Airport, which is a very comparable facility to Lake City, former military base, constructed about the same time as Lake City. Boeing, for example, is paying $15.35 a square foot. I know I helped negotiate that lease when I was on the board of the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. I'm not saying that $15 is the Lake City rate, but in just a minute I'll get to what I think that rate probably is. And that would be a good time because I know this has been mentioned earlier. This is a sublease. The 30-year contract HAECO was operating under allowed them the freedom of subleasing property within their leasehold that they weren't using at the time. Hangar number 9 was leased to Triad International Maintenance Corporation. Actually, International Aerospace Coatings was leased this hangar by HAECO's operating arm at the time for a square footage rate of about $4.71 a square foot. This took place on September the 13th, 2017, little over 5 years ago. We all know inflation would make that a greater rate, maybe around $5.50 or $8.50 a square foot. And what struck me when I first obtained a copy of this lease was that HAECO was receiving substantially more rent for subletting one of their 8 hangars than they were paying for the entire leasehold. And that was the deal at the time, but we're in reset mode right now, and it's time that Lake City receive their due. And this airport can be a ticket to your prosperity. It really can. There are very few communities that have a runway like this with clear approaches, no noise problems, no safety problems. You're located near the intersection of 2 of the major interstate highways in the country, 50 miles from a deep water seaport. Rail access, every utility you could dream of comes right through here. And it only makes sense to obtain fair market value and using HAECO's own behavior by what they charge others. I don't think they'd get up here and tell us they were taking advantage of somebody. I haven't heard that argument yet. But that would have them paying around $5 million a year in rent. And this is commensurate with what other businesses around the world who do MRO work, maintenance, repair, and overhaul work on air carrier jets. So I can't stress enough the importance of arriving at a fair deal, because if you don't, and the airport is not self-sustaining, my advice or my warning to Lake City is that the airport could go bankrupt and drag the city down with it. You simply have too much at stake here, and you have an opportunity to bring this city to a new era of prosperity if this very valuable resource is managed properly. There is plenty of wealth to go around here. The workers can keep their jobs. They can be paid well. HAECO can pay fair rent, and everybody can move forward. And I haven't heard an explanation as to why 8 cents a square foot, other than it's double what was offered before. If we can't reach an agreement, I would close with this recommendation. I think it would be wise to extend HAECO's lease on a month-to-month basis, and in the meantime, obtain a fair and honest appraisal of what this property is worth. in terms of fair rental rates. And once we have that number, either renegotiate with HAECO or issue a request for proposals to a world aviation market. There is a pent-up demand for facilities like this. To duplicate this facility, in my opinion, would cost about $1 billion. The 700,000 square feet of hangar space, 115 acres. And that is how I would accommodate everyone's interest here, is to allow HAECO to remain in the hunt for this, but insist that Lake City receive a fair share. Everybody can be prosperous, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might.
Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I may have some questions.
Okay.
Yes, questions.
I don't have any questions. What I have to say is that I do appreciate every remark, every response that has been spoken here tonight. I appreciate the concerns, the considerations of the future of Lake City. And I visited HAECO, I believe, last Thursday. And I sat with administration and I asked a whole lot of questions that I had. Some questions I felt very confident in one side, and then some questions left me with more questions. But when I walked out into those hangars and I observed those employees, their hard work, their dedication, all of my value goes toward those employees. I hear the fair market value, I hear all of that, I hear the great gain for the city, but as for me, those employees hold more value to Lake City than anything that has been spoken in here tonight. I would not leave here tonight with a feeling of rightful doing in my heart, if to leave here and know that these employees could wake up in 2023 and not have a job. And I would right now make a motion that we vote now, that we accept. We have had time to look over this contract. We didn't do anything at the last meeting because we didn't have time to review the contract. We've had enough time to look at the contract, to consider, and I just believe we ought to be ready to make a motion, to vote now.
Okay, Ms. Sampson, did you have a question?
I have some questions.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions. I agree though with Ms. Young on the employees being important. I'm kind of concerned that HAECO didn't put them in the utmost importance and negotiate fairly. I think it's ridiculous that we got to this point by them offering 8 cents a square foot when a quick search you can find that ground lease at an airport, straight land lease is 20 to 55 cents a foot for the entire ground. And that's on an average. You look at the city of Austin right now, I don't know if Mr. Booth's aware, they're having some real issues with some under fair market leases. We could say that HAECO has 650 employees. I believe they do. I don't know how many are full-time and how many are contract. That's some questions we'll get into, I'm sure, as we go through. I have some real questions, though, when it comes to what HAECO is offering. HAECO in Greensboro, North Carolina is not paying 8 cents a square foot. I can tell you that. HAECO net operating profit for 2021 was $67 million at 2 locations in the US, Lake City, Greensboro. So to me, to say a company that has a net profit of $67 million is offering 8 cents a foot and is not willing to protect their employees, I do agree, that's a shame. And I think it's not right for the 12,000 city residents to subsidize this company in such a way that we are putting the city at risk of having to possibly repay a $25 million grant. I don't know where we're gonna repay that from, but I think the main thing is, if we go back to the very beginning of this, back in 2020, when we first started to negotiate with Mark Easton's predecessor, and even since Mark's been there, is we had whole different numbers being discussed than 300,000. I don't remember 300,000 ever crossing the plate when we talked to Mr. Booth or to HAECO on site. To get hit with that at the last minute is absolutely ludicrous. And so I have another question, Mr. Booth. What's our liability if we take this lease for this 30 years? Can you explain why we cannot further expand the airport with what they're doing in this exhibit with the property they're leasing?
Unlike many airports that are owned by independent political subdivisions like Orlando and Jacksonville, Lake City owns and operates that airport. You are the airport sponsor. And you are not insulated from cost overruns at that airport. It would have to come out of the city budget, and if the rental income is not adequate to support the airport, it's going to have to come out of money otherwise designated for schools or fire protection or things like that. And you know, I can give you an example of why there need to be cash reserves. A sewer pipe broke a few years ago under one of HAECO's hangars. It cost the city $360,000 to repair that. That was 2 years and 3 months rent, and you can't operate like that. It has to be self-sustaining, and it needs to be commensurate with decency and fair play. And we have surveyed the world market. I think an appraisal might be in order that would take every factor into account. I think the comparable 42 miles from here is relevant, and
Well, and I think that we were at like 1/3 of that at $5 a foot, 1/3 of what they're paying, which would probably be about right for the comparable. Another issue I have though is that Lake City's not treated the same because we allow ourselves to be taken advantage of. When HAECO signed the 40-year lease agreement at Greensboro, and they spent $265 million, I believe it was, on that hangar addition. If you look at that lease there, they don't lease in such a way they block access to land. That airport's actually run in such a way that it allows more people access so they can expand the borders. We could bring in 3 or 4 other MROs. We could bring IAC. IAC reached out to the city when Ms. Fields was here and was willing to pay the city for every hangar what they were paying HAECO for one hangar. So knowing that fact, I think we would be negligent in our jobs. And by the way, IAC said they would hire more people than HAECO, because HAECO's promised a lot of people, but the numbers don't often match the promise when you look at the direct to indirect. So to me, I would think we should put, I don't want to see HAECO, I want to see them have a negotiating position. I would like to give them the first opportunity to negotiate, but I do think we need some kind of valuation method to even know what it's worth. If you rent a commercial building, just any commercial building in Columbia County, you're not paying less than $9 a foot. I mean, that's for any kind of commercial building, retail, doctor's office. So to think that 8 cents a foot for a company that nets $67 million in profit is fair, I would challenge anyone here. One thing, they could pay their employees a heck of a lot more than what they're paying them on that, because where's that money going? It's going back to China or wherever, Britain or wherever it's going. So, and to have Florida State come with the report on behalf of a foreign company, I was wondering who they were working for. Were they signed on as a foreign company sponsor, or where did that come from? Who ordered that report? I don't know, somebody ordered the report, but for it to come out in October and then those numbers didn't match the internal numbers HAECO gave us. They're 2 different numbers, so something's not correct.
Mr. Bowden asked to speak a couple of minutes after Mr. Booth got through. Mr. Bowden, did you want to speak again?
And Mr. Sampson, just one more point relevant to what you have shared with us. The aerospace industries in the United States are moving to the southeast for a variety of reasons. A ready labor force, non-union labor. It's no secret Boeing wants out of Seattle, Washington. They have moved major parts of their operation to South Carolina. And
Can you tell me what they pay their employees?
Boeing?
Roughly.
I don't know.
I saw a study that some of the people that sweep the floor, they make $55 an hour.
Oh, but maybe under the union scale in
So-
Seattle, Washington, and that's one of the reasons they're moving to the southeast. But Lake City is in a prime position to take advantage of that. And there can be prosperity for everyone, and I think that's not being recognized in the tone of these negotiations.
Mr. Mayor, before we go on, one more thing. I think there's a win-win here. One, HAECO get them to the table with a fair offer, which this isn't, is that what we should do is, I agree with one of the comments, why don't we extend the lease while we get a valuation? And then give them first option to meet the valuation, or we could put it out for RFP and see who's willing to bid. I mean, I don't know how you rent something you don't know what the value is.
Mr. Biden, did you want to finish?
I'm having a vertigo problem, so I'm wobbling like that. I'm starting to get up. But anyway, let me say this, Mr. Mayor. I'm familiar with Cecil Field. I remember when it went from military access to commercial. And I don't understand Copper. I'm not going to say I understand, but I just can't see Cecil Field, given the size and the community it serves, being a comparable to Lake City, Florida, and Columbia County. I just don't see that. I don't see that. But I do think that there's a value also, Mayor, in the people that work out there, people that live there. You know, yeah, it may not be $25 a square foot or $10, but there's some value in these people. It's not money, it's in the people. So you got a contract that's being proposed by your city attorney and your city manager. But it seems to me, you have to make a decision. Are you going to accept the opinion of your city attorney and the opinion of your city manager as being what's in the best interest of the city and citizen? Or are you going to accept the opinion of an attorney that you're hired to assist? I think it's problematic for me as a citizen. If I was on the city council, I would be trying to understand who am I to listen to here tonight? Am I to listen to the city manager and the city attorney, or am I to listen to Attorney Booth, who I respect a lot just because it serves to the community? But I think now you have something in front of you. So either you accept that's being proposed by the city manager and the city attorney and go back to the drawing board, which I don't know if you got that kind of time, but suggest that the employee should live from month to month. We're going to have your lease for a month, for another month, for another month. That's just not fair. And what is the fair market value? I read in the lease that they're willing to pay whatever FAA said is. So if they're willing to comply with the FAA, then we can determine the fair market value according to FAA. Because that's the one who we got to satisfy at the end of the day. And if it's not as much as they get in Jacksonville and Cecilsville, so be it. But we talking about the people who live in our community, and I think they should leave here tonight now feeling encouraged that they're gonna have a job for the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's another option. Now, I really like the idea that Attorney Booth, who was also the city's attorney, put out to extend the lease. That way there's not the uncertainty for the employees and give us the time to come up with that value. It just makes sense. I mean, I don't know how you can work or operate when a company is as big as HAECO and try to stiff arm a city when really they need to come to the table. And having direct conversations with HAECO employees, the number that we discussed was nowhere near 300,000, I can tell you. And so to me, and with the comments made at this last meeting about the uneducated nature of people here, I don't think it's right. I think we need to become educated, and how we do that is we get evaluation and we offer them an extension to the lease. I would even be willing to go up to 6 months and then month to month. That way it locks in a longer time, or even a year, and lock it in. That gives us time to get our appraisal and put it up for an RFP or negotiate with HAECO on the appraised value. I think that's, how fair can you be in appraised value? That's the value.
Mr. Bowden actually made, I wrote on here in my note that we have our city manager and we have our city attorney. And they both expressed, the city manager, the city attorney, I know both, they expressed that they had worked together into bringing this contract together. So if we can't trust our own city manager and our own city attorney, I think that's the problem. Now, they gave us, the assurance, and then we had time to go and check the records for ourselves, this contract. So we should be ready to make a move tonight and close this out.
Mr. Kim, there is a clause in there that if the FAA is satisfied that it goes to mediation.
No, sir, it doesn't read quite like that.
But why he's looking for that? Again, first of all, I don't want to see no one in this room tonight lose their job. And I agree with extending this lease agreement until we can come to a fair market value. Mr. Sampson said 6 months, I say a year. But again, I don't want nobody to lose their job. But the city, Lake City has lost a lot since I've been on this council. It's a certain building downtown right now that the city is paying for, is indebted to. And the way this is going now, HAECO will be the same way this building is right now. It's causing the city to lose money. And again, I would love to, I worked out there back when it was Aero back in the 80s. And ain't nothing changed out there. Nothing. And the only thing I'm asking is that HAECO do what's right by the city and his employees. That's all I'm asking. And for us being educated, Mr. whatever your name is, I got more education than you think I got. Because I took that personal.
Ken, if you want.
I don't think he's found it just yet, but I went out there a few days ago myself, and I met with some very, very important people out there. And my heart went out to every employee there, every one of you guys, every one. I don't know I think I was on first shift. I think you got like 3 shifts out there, 3 or 4 shifts. And the condition, I didn't like, but the people I loved. Because I saw the hard work. I saw the effort that everybody was putting in. You know, guys coming in from Tampa, other states, they are really working to get those planes or aircraft out in a timely manner. So the money is there. And I want everybody to get their due, especially the employees. Now, I do want those hangars to come up. And my understanding, every penny that we get goes into the airport itself. I like to see heaters out there. I like to see fans that work. It was a name of the fan that they told me that it was, but I'm not going to say that name. But it doesn't work from my understanding. I need to see those things working. I need to see that money put into those hangars, the grounds, the plumbing. I went to use the restroom. I couldn't even reach it. They're like this tall. I couldn't reach it. There's something wrong with that picture. I saw a young man out there mopping the floor, and I was wondering why was he mopping the floor, because he didn't change the water. He's just mopping the floor. And I was like, is he doing that to try to impress me or impress his boss or whatever? I didn't quite understand that. So all I want, just like everybody else up here, I'm caring for you guys. And I'm so happy to see so many HAECO employees here. I'm so happy to see that. That lets me know that you guys care. You guys want your jobs. And I want to make sure that you keep your job. You know, if I got anything to do with it, nobody is going to lose their job. Not on my watch. I'm with Mr. Bowden. Mr. Bowden says, look at the people and what they bring here, what they have brought here already. Okay? But the working conditions out there, if we're going to spend money, if you guys are going to spend money, okay, we want those conditions to look just like the administration building out there. The administration building out there, oh my goodness, you could probably eat off the floor. But those hangars, the ground, the parking lots, even the bench, where the guard shack is. That won't get it. That will not get it. I want it to be appealing to everybody. When you come out there, I want to see the appealing. I don't want to see the railings where you can see all the way up there, straight through the sky, and the rain is coming down or it's flooding because you don't have a proper drainage system out there. I just don't want to see that. Those working conditions is very, very poor. Now, maybe we dropped the ball on that. Maybe HAECO dropped the ball. But we got to get that back in order. Okay? So again, I appreciate all of you guys. I'm ready to make a motion as well. I wanted to be fair to you guys. I want you guys to have a good working relationship with the city. We'd love for you guys to come to all of the meetings. The county, come and enjoy yourself. Know that you got a job. I think we got somebody up there, I think I see one guy, he's been out there 30 years. I think I see one guy out there, he's been out there 22 years. I seen somebody out there who'd been out there 6 months. I've seen somebody out there with three years. So moms, dads, brothers, cousins, you guys are very, very important to me. And I want to make sure that everybody is treated fair. Everybody. The city of Lake City, of course, that's my interest. I got elected to this position. These decisions are not easy decisions. And you guys have to make it easy for everybody to make a decision. It's, why we're here now because it's a hard decision to make. Everybody's concerned about their job. I get it. I do not want to see anybody out there. I don't care if it's maintenance. I don't care if it's the custodial. I don't want to see nobody lose their job, period. That's it.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
We're hearing a lot of what should have been, what we should be getting, what we can be getting, but we have HAECO now. And I was listening to one of the presenters talked about the 1942 Lake City Gateway Naval Air Station, and I spoke with a man in the community who actually worked there during that time. He was a part of this. He was in the military. All that's great, and all this great gain for Lake City, but that's not in hand. It's what we should be getting. It's what we ought to be getting, what we should have been getting. But we're at a place now where we have HAECO, we have all these employees, and it's just time. And I just pray we can get through this tonight and not have to bring it back.
Mayor,
Mayor.
if I may.
Yes.
Real quick, to answer your question so I don't forget.
Right.
With the magic of technology, it looks like that 5.9 in the red line version
Right.
that I understood had been approved did not make it into, it's the only one that I found before the meeting. It's the Federal Aviation Administration Assurances Compliance.
Right.
And I'll read it for the record. In the event the annual base rent becomes insufficient to make the airport self-sustaining, as required by the Federal Aviation Administration, the parties agree to enter negotiations to alter the rent schedule contained or outlined herein to become as self-sustaining as possible. If the parties cannot agree and the airport loses FAA grant eligibility, Lake City shall have the right to terminate the lease and solicit a new lessee via a request for proposals, RFP.
Mr. Mayor.
Would be my advice that if anything is approved, that language be included.
That has to be added back. They take care, removed it. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask the attorney a question.
Sure.
So would you make a recommendation as the city attorney that we would move forward without an appraisal on anything we would rent?
That's your safest bet to determine fair market value.
Isn't
I
it?
have no legal opinion as to the numbers. That is a determination of, is the airport self-sustaining under the FAA guidelines? That's a financial issue, not a legal issue.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we would extend HAECO's contract for 1 year and that we would seek out an appraisal and at that time negotiate with HAECO first. If we can't come to an agreement, then to do an RFP.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, So how much is gonna be the rent?
I would say maintain at the current rate, which is half of what they're offering here.
150,000?
So it's to HAECO's benefit as well, and that gives us an opportunity to move forward, and it secures the employees. And it makes sure that we're doing what FAA requires us, because nothing could be worse than having to write that $25 million check if we don't have the money for it.
I'd like to move forward, but put that clause in that, Mr. Kennon just read. So that we would be,
There's a motion on the floor.
You're in the discussion mode now.
right.
If I might, Mr. Kenny, if you could refer to section 17.
Come
Where's that?
on. Please ask you to call the roll.
You get too many log, hang on one second. If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna. Yeah, we have requested on behalf of the city that the additional language be included in addition to the assurances for the federal aviation.
Language was accepted by HAECO.
Sir?
Okay,
The language was accepted.
I thought it was.
okay. Ms. Ox, will you call the roll?
Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
No.
Mr. Jernigan?
No.
Mayor Witt?
No. Again, I'd like to see the lease, but with the FAA assurance in it.
Mr. Mayor, so where are we with the 300,000? You're saying you're good with 8 cents a square foot when a standard airport lease for ground is about 55 cents a foot?
But when it goes up and then there's, they're gonna improve the hangars and put money into them, and that's to be done within 180 days, which is additional.
But their current lease calls for them to maintain the hangars. Mr. Jernigan talked about the current structure and function out there, and HAECO is already fiscally responsible for maintaining that.
But it hasn't been enforced, and this does.
It hasn't been enforced, that's correct. So we're assuming that this would, but I don't see how it benefits the city to take a lease so far under market. Is there a way, I'd like to ask Mr. Booth a question, is there a way we can ask the FAA to intervene if this lease is underneath the market, as it did in Austin?
In my experience, no. The FAA is an understaffed agency right now, and they typically don't give out advisory opinions. They become involved in disputes that are brought to them through a formal process called Part 16. And I don't think we could expect the FAA to give us essentially legal advice, just in my experience.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may correct one thing so that we have an understanding of the way it's written, the 180 days is not a time period within which HAECO is required to make any improvements. The 180 days is when they will submit a facility maintenance plan.
That's what I meant.
And if we inserted some language which HAECO accepted, that if we can't agree on that plan, then we'll submit it to a mediator who has an expertise in the aviation area to help us resolve whatever dispute we may have with that plan. But it's not a time frame within which to make any improvements, and there's no requirement that there's any conditions within that plan now. We wait 180 days and see what the proposal is. But we did put a provision in there that we do have some remedy and method to resolve any differences, which was not in there before.
With all that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we accept this HAECO lease.
With that, putting the FAA compliance in.
Mayor, could I make a comment first?
Yes.
Please. I'd like to make a comment to the language of the FFA. I know a lot of that gets brought up and is talked about all during our negotiations, I kept hearing fair market value. Fair market value is, to me, is what the area can sustain and who's willing to pay and who's willing to accept it. Now, the language for the FFA, we had that put in, HAECO agreed with it. If FFA came back and said they were unacceptable with it, I guess my question is, if since 2014, we've got almost $25 million in FFA grants, and FFA hadn't said anything about it yet. And we have a previous airport manager make the comments, but yet at that time, he was receiving FFA grants for our airport, but nothing was ever mentioned or discussed back then that I'm aware of. So I don't quite understand why we keep saying this agreement is being held back by FFA if they haven't had an issue with it up to this point. Now, that doesn't mean they might not have an issue going forward. That's why we put the language in there to protect the city. Now, when we started these negotiations, everything got off to a bad, rocky start. And like I made the comment last meeting, and conversations and direction from individuals from the council, that was way too much, and we wanted to keep HAECO here in the city, and we do. Now, to me, keeping HAECO here is not $11 million a year. Is it $5 million a year? That's not my decision to make. That's you all's decision to make. But at the end of the day, like it's being said, and the same way I try to operate with the city, the employees are the biggest asset. They're the biggest asset for HAECO, they're the biggest asset for our community. And you have to put a face with that. The same thing we do with our employees is what I try to do. So we can sit here and we can hash over the numbers and everything else, and from my understanding, this lease goes back, what, 30 years? And in 30 years, from them paying what they have, the airport hadn't went bankrupt yet. So they're offering to double the thing and get us up to the 500,000, which was mentioned, plus a 3% increase after that. So with that being said, there's also language in there with the airport ever becomes where it's not sustainable. It's my understanding, yes, it's an enterprise fund. I understand enterprise fund because utilities is an enterprise fund. I know how they're used. But with that being said, they're a non-profit. We're not at the airport to make money. The airport's there to sustain itself. If we make $10 million a year, we're gonna have to invest $10 million a year. If you're making that much money, FFA is not gonna give you any grant money because you're making too much money. So at the end of the day, it comes down to, and I would ask the council to look at what's really important here. I don't think the airport is gonna go bankrupt anytime soon, especially if we quit paying airport attorneys big salaries for their input that makes us go over the budget. So my suggestion would be that we look at the overall picture and look at it holistically of what HAECO is willing to do to the hangars, do to the airport. We have language in there now to where we have the ability to go out and inspect and hold HAECO responsible for the maintenance that wasn't done in the past. The maintenance that wasn't done in the past is both the city, HAECO, TIMCO, and Aero's fault. Because what I can see, the city never held HAECO responsible or TIMCO, and if you're not holding somebody responsible to fix something and you're not going out there and inspecting it, why would they have the right to do it? Now, have they done it? Yes, they should have. Should the city have went out there? Yes, they should have. So there's equal blame on that end, because I know that was brought up. But at the end of the day, it's what the city or what this council thinks is really important. Is it the people? Is it constituents? Or is it making millions of dollars out of the airport that we're gonna have to invest back in the airport anyway that we can get grants for? And that's all I gotta say.
Mr. Mayor, I have a rebuttal to that. That's not exactly correct, because it's also a benefit to a multi-billion-dollar company. And I'm still confused as how we got from what HAECO was offering in the 1.5 million range down to 300,000. I'm just unsure how that happened. But so to me, it's gonna be a hard no on this, because they already offer more than what's in this lease to begin with.
If I could, Mayor. I would maybe like to jog the councilman's memory, sitting in the assistant manager's office on several occasions, sitting across from me, when he came in after the original debacle and asked that, one, the airport manager not be involved in the negotiations, which I guess you failed to mention that, and that you had mentioned that that was way too much, and you thought 500,000 was more of a real.
That is incorrect and a lie, Mr. Dial.
Well,
And I could call Mark Esper up here right now because he and I talked directly about 1.5 million, which is the exact number that you and I talked about as being a beginning point, as being a
I
beginning
appreciate you
point.
cutting me off there, Councilman, but,
Well, when you hear a lie, you gotta come back.
Yeah, you can sit here and say, you can say whatever
And you
you
can
want.
too. You
and I
can say whatever you
too.
want. You attacked our attorney we're paying a fee to.
Whatever.
Okay, I believe,
Okay.
I believe before, I mean, it was my turn.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And please, can this motion, whatever it's gonna do, it need to do it.
Okay.
I wanna make a motion at this time that we, that we accept this contract from HAECO. With the, did we need to,
With the language I read into the record.
yes, sir, with the language that, city attorney read into the record.
Okay. Is there a second? Can you do?
I'll second for
You
discussion.
can't discuss until there's a second.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay.
I'm not in favor,
So
but
now,
I'll second for
so
discussion.
comments now.
Yes. I was just trying to figure out, how did we get to the 300,000? Why didn't we stay with the 150,000? Why did we even go up? I mean, every penny that we get is gonna go right back to the airport. So, and then if a hangar is leaking or sewer pipe break or the restroom, latrine areas, HAECO is gonna be responsible to repair it, am I correct?
We're repeating ourselves.
No, I just want to make sure, how did we get to the 300,000? Why don't we just charge them 150,000 like we were before? And let these people have their jobs.
Mr. Mayor, so there's other expenses at the airport other than just HAECO that lease covers.
Yes, I totally understand that. But again, why did we go from 150 to 300,000 when the money is going to be spent right back out there to the airport?
Because we need to maintain the airport.
Why can't HAECO do it?
They do. Well, they're supposed to.
That's what I'm saying. They in the contract. Yes, please. Can you come up here?
Under the existing contract, HAECO is responsible for maintenance of the hangars that constitute their leasehold. Things like underground utilities are Lake City's problem. And when they break, it's a big bill, and you've got to have money in reserve for things like that. Lightning strikes the runway lights, and it costs tens of thousands to repair. There has to be a budget. There needs to be a budget to market this airport. There's a lot of available land. And future leases will be constrained if you enact a low amount. I've already warned about that.
You did.
But you can't, it's not sound logic, I don't think, to say that why do we charge people to use the airport? Because it goes back to the airport. The Lake City has some specific responsibilities to maintain the infrastructure. The hangars are to be maintained by me. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Everybody ready? Okay, Ms. Sarks, call the roll, please.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Sampson?
No.
Mr. Hill?
No.
Mr. Jernigan?
No.
Mayor Witt?
Yes. There's 3 no's. All right. We have another motion.
Can I make the motion to extend the lease agreement for a year? Till we can come back to the table and come up with a fair market value for this, lease agreement. And my thing is, HAECO leased out a hangar a few years ago for X amount of dollars. And then now they're gonna come before us and want us to make a lease to them for 8 cents a square foot, and they was getting $4 and something a square foot. Come on, it's something wrong with that picture. $4.71, like I said, this a few years ago, $4.71 a square foot. That's what they was subleasing this hangar to. And here tonight, or the other day, they're gonna present a lease agreement to us for 8 cents a square feet. There's something wrong with that.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, you want to extend the present lease for a year at the same rate?
Yes.
And what did you say about getting the value?
Getting the value of, a market value of what it's worth out there. Again, I'm not asking for millions of dollars, but pay the city what is somewhat worth. But it's worth more than 8 cents a square foot.
Okay. All right.
Do I have a, is it discussion?
Are you in discussion now, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We have got to stop looking at the past, where we are. And I think we're hung up on looking at what happened back then. Let's come on up to today. And let's make a difference today. We can't make a difference with what happened in the past. It's beginning to cause personal feelings to come out.
Well,
I agree with that. I think we should look at the future, which is what an increase to the lease would do. Be looking to the future of this county and the city and the ability to develop the airport with other jobs other than just HAECO. And so I think this is the best course of action, is to get a value and at the same time extend the lease for a year where they're paying half of their proposed amount for the current year.
Well, I had, with the FAA thing that was in the motion, I was supporting that, but since the vote we had, I think that we need to extend the lease to get back to negotiating. We don't have consensus of the council.
You're in discussion, am I correct?
Right.
Is there any way that, I guess, Mr. Hill, he's not asking for millions, and, I couldn't figure out how we got to 300,000. Is there any way we could start it to maybe 500,000 the first year? Would that be sufficient?
Well, that's what I think needs to
That's why we're coming back to the table, we're gonna come back to the table.
No, we don't need to go back. We want to do it tonight. 500,000 tonight, and I'll make that motion, and then we'll see.
We have a motion.
There's already a motion.
Yes.
You just want it, go back to the 150.
Yeah, but see, well, we gotta come somewhere. We got to come to some type of agreement. That's all I'm saying. We got to get to an agreement.
All right, well, let's vote on this motion.
Okay.
Let's
Mayor.
actually call the roll.
Mayor, let me repeat back the motion. So the motion is to extend the lease for 1 year and seek an appraisal for fair market value. Is that correct, Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Okay, and is that correct, Mr. Sampson? Okay. Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
No.
Mr. Jernigan? Mr. Jernigan? His silent vote does count as a yes vote.
You have to vote though under the
Yeah,
procedure.
he's a silent vote, it's a yes. Mr. Jernigan? Okay. Mayor?
Yes. All right, so we'll be back to the drawing table, and that concludes our business.
So we still don't know, we got a pretty good
We
job.
will be adjourned. Thank y'all for coming.